A prediction. On the 9th of May 2022, what might Putin do? As the 9th of May is the major symbolic date for the Russian state cult of the Great Victory, it also serves as a psychological benchmark for Z war. Thus on the 9th of May Putin will feel pressure to declare either 1. A tactical victory, 2. A rapid escalation. Let's discuss both. Thread. Why would Putin declare a tactical victory? Well, because he can't declare a strategic one. Russian people are not that stupid. What Putin could do is achieve some tactical success and present it as a major symbolic victory which would show that the war is going somewhat okayish. What could serve as a symbolic victory showing that Russia hadn't failed its invasion totally by the 9th of May? Most probably, the capture of Mariupol. Siege of Mariupol has been going for 2 months, but the Russians didn't crush the last pocket of resistance on the Azovstal steel plant. Mariupol had been bombed and attacked by pro-Russian forces for months with massive casualties. From the military standpoint it might make little sense. Isolating this city and cutting its supply lines would be more reasonable, but it has a significant symbolic value. Mariupol is a large urban center of the Russophone East Ukraine which Russians were supposed to liberate. And yet, it turned into the center of resistance. While resistance in Galicia is something Russian worldview would allow for, resistance in Novorossiya is unacceptable. The very fact that the Russophone troops from the East Ukraine do even resist is absolutely shocking for Kremlin. Furthermore, the 2 months-long defense of Mariupol in an absolutely desperate situation made it a sort of Alcazar-like symbol, which should be crushed at any cost.
Щодня відчуваю втрату мого світла. Мотори, звуки автівок замивають пліви платівок. Якщо це по-справжньому набридло, хочу знову я вернути спокій. Правда, шкода, що вже все промерзло, та пішло нарешті на покій. І звуки касет, ми з тобою вдвох заснемо навіки без турбота зла. Та знову чаруєм ці часи епох, щоб доля знову назавжди звела. І звуки касет, ми з тобою вдвох заснемо навіки без турбота зла. Та знову чаруєм ці часи епох, щоб доля знову назавжди звела. Повітря щодня відчуваю втрату мого світла. Мотори, звуки автівок замивають пліви платівок. І якщо це по-справжньому набридло, хочу знову я вернути спокій. Правда, шкода, що вже все промерзло, та пішло нарешті на покій. І звуки касет, ми з тобою вдвох заснемо навіки без турбота зла. Та знову чаруєм ці часи
While Russian propaganda focuses on the Azov participation in the defense of Mariupol, portraying them as Nazis, we should consider that for Russian propaganda a Nazi is first and foremost a racial or cultural traitor who could be Russian but refused to. Nazis equals those who could Russify but chose not to. Look at the birthplace regions of the Azov commanders. Kharkiv is the center. Three commanders are from there, including the founder. Next are Kyiv and Poltava. 2. Finally, Sumy and Luhansk. 1. Not a single one from the west. I'll cover the history of Azov later. For now I'll say that it debunks the Russian myth about bad Nazi West controlling good Russian east of Ukraine. In fact, it is large Russophone cities of the east, especially Kharkiv, that are the main clusters of Ukrainian nationalism. While Russians portray Ukrainian nationalism as an essentially Western, Galician phenomenon, in fact Galicia provides more of a cultural standard than the actual leadership. Lviv would be more of a Tuscany of the Ukrainian national movement, while Kharkiv would be its Piedmont. This explains much of Russian anger against Ukrainian resistors. As Shanazarov told, Z-letter opposers must understand they won't be spared. Instead they'll get concentration camps, re-education, sterilization. Notice there's no talk of Nazis, only of Z-letter opposers.
Вот этой буквы Z должны понимать, что если они рассчитывают, что их пощадят, нет, их не пощадят. Нет, это все по-серьезному уже. Это в случае чего концлагеря, перевоспитание, это, так сказать, стерилизация, это все очень серьезно. Поэтому тут вопрос о том, что этот вопрос России решили...
Journalist Olshansky suggests publicly hanging Azov defenders of Mariupol while making local civilians to watch and leave them hang for a while as a horrifying reminder of who's a master here. Russian propagandists low-key admit that Russian rule can be imposed only through terror. That's a Moscow journalist Dmitry Olshansky who calls for public executions while making civilians to watch in order to establish dominance. He isn't some lunatic, but rather a member of hereditary cultural establishment of Moscow and a strong advocate for the war with Ukraine. There is a strong indication that Putin will try to capture Azovstal by the 9th of May. Why? Because he claimed otherwise. On the 21st of April he publicly told to Shoigu that soldiers shouldn't descend into the catacombs and lose lives, which means he will send them into the catacombs. Azovstal tunnels and bunkers were built in the Soviet era when the prospect of a nuclear war looked imminent. They were designed in a way to survive a nuclear strike. That's why they became a safe haven for civilians. Those trying to capture Azovstal will suffer heavy casualties. Why Putin is so comfortable with losing men who must go into the Azovstal catacombs and die there en masse? Well, 'cause he won't send Russians there, he'll send Ukrainians. I strongly suspect that most of Russian casualties in Z war were not Russians but forcibly drafted Ukrainians. Have you ever considered how pro-Russian Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics recruited their troops? Their armies went through 3 stages of development. 1. Volunteers. 2. Mercenaries. 3. Total mobilization. Now we are on a stage 3. Every male up to 55-60 is a cannon fodder. Initially pro-Russian forces in Donbass were comprised from volunteers. Some of them were Russian nationalists or adventurists. Others were members of local administrations and law enforcement. Third were real local volunteers. All were led by a Russian FSB Colonel Strelkov. With the war going on, DPR and LPR soon ran out of volunteers. Fortunately, in a war-devastated Donbass they could hire fighters cheaply. Where did they take the cash to pay them? Well, Russian gave it. Russian subsidized DPR and LPR puppets to keep the Donbass war going on. Russian subsidies allowed to pay a 25,000 rubles salary to everyone who enlisted to fight against Ukraine. In a war-torn Donbass that was often the only job available. Since these people enlisted for cash they were mocked as 25,000ers, referring to their low morale. And yet, a mercenary army of 25,000ers wasn't good enough. First, it's still costly. Why pay anything when you can pay nothing? Besides, with the high casualties they soon ran out of mercenaries. 2. Since 2015 they started experimenting with forced mobilization. At this point pro-Russian DPR and LPR authorities are forcing anyone under 55-60 into the army and sending them into the frontline assault to the heavily fortified Ukrainian positions. Of course, they are being massacred. Listen to Strelkov, who started it all.
В Донецке и Луганске прошла тотальная мобилизация. Прямо сегодня мне написали о том, что в Луганске мобилизуют профессоров и преподавателей высших учебных заведений. Как технических, так и гуманитарных. Всех, в том числе в возрасте старше 50 лет. Людей, которые никогда не служили в армии, которые никогда не держали в руках оружие. Кстати, более половины мобилизованных, которые уже находятся на фронте, не умеют заряжать автомат.
That's how the Donetsk and Luhansk armies look like. Notice their equipment, helmets for example. Russians forced these Ukrainian nationals into their puppets' armies, gave them whatever garbage remained from the Soviet stocks and sent them to die. In contact they discuss mobilized DPR soldiers in Mariupol with obsolete equipment like Masinka guns originally based on 1891 design and not used in the army since the 1950s. I very much hope they are not being sent forward as meat in the first line. Well, of course they are. Fucking shame, they recruited them as meat. Thanks for not giving them forks to fight. They gave them helmets of 1941. You couldn't make up a better anti-ad. It's sad when the entire company has Masinkas. That's a shame. After a month they could have brought some equipment. Nazis are being supplied by half of Europe and the US, and these guys are fighting with Masinkas. I feel bad for these men. They never fought, don't know anything. They are common workers from a coal mine and they don't even have ammunitions. Damn, why did they send them there? They are literally crowdfunding the basic equipment for the forcibly mobilized DPR and LPR soldiers. Here, for example, they managed to crowdfund 3,600 rubles to buy them shovels. Notice the reactions of gratitude below the post. Russian volunteer who served in the LPR army but then deserted and made it back to Russia is describing the literal utilization of the LPR male population. Forcibly mobilized Ukrainians nationals are being sent to attack Ukrainian positions naked without even the body armor. As the Donbass war has been going since 2014, Ukrainians had time to build very thorough fortifications. Notice how Russian TV correspondent is describing an abandoned Ukrainian position. Why would he need to show that? Well, to show where Russian advance goes slower than planned.
Смотрите, вот типовой их укрепленный блиндаж сделан, ну, это что-то невероятное. Огромная массивная дверь, 40 сантиметров высококачественного бетона. Это очень хороший бетон. Дальше. Еще одна дверь, предбанник. Не знаю, сколько она, может, тонну весит. Здесь у них была буржуйка. Такие основательные бронированные бойницы вот такой толщины. И вот здесь, туда она уходит, вот настолько. Вот примерно вот с этой, с фронтовой стены, вот такое количество. За моей спиной у них там база 7-8 метров в глубину. Такие же забетонированные мощные бомбоубежища. С ходами, сообщениями, совсем с бойницами. Можно вести бой. Вот как раз полностью просматривается дорога. Вот она. Вот. И вот это сейчас приходится штурмовать нашим войскам для понимания того, с чем они сталкиваются. Вот здесь вот все по уму сделано. Сеточки, это сделано для того, чтобы при попадании снаряда вот этот защитный слой кевларовый не отлетали бетонные осколки, которые могут поразить того, кто находится внутри. Сделано все основательно, капитально, и по уму это все делалось, накапливалось много-много лет.
Watch these mobilized Ukrainian nationals from the Donbass who are being press-ganged into the army by Russians and sent into the frontal assaults as the cannon fodder. This gives some context to how the male population of Donbass is being recycled in Z-war.
Мы военнослужащие из Донбасса.
Обычные работяги, блядь, дети нахуй. Энергетики, блядь, заводчане, блядь. Оказались на территории России с оружием. 18-летних взяли. Нельзя, блядь, в жопе нахуй.
Нас полегло.
Все, что мы здесь делаем?
Нас много полегло.
Мы на сумах, блядь, какого-то хуя.
Есть на ютубе видео, где наших товарищей взяли в плен.
На сумах мы вообще были как в подкове просто и все.
Нас поставили.
Нас погибло очень много.
Так что и что мы здесь делаем?
Знайте правду. Министерство обороны РФ о нас понятия не имеет, что мы здесь делаем. Нас кидают в жопу.
Нас незаконно завезли в Российскую Федерацию, ночами возили. С оружием, без документов, без нихуя. Верните нас в Донбасс.
Нас с автоматами ставят против градов, артиллерии, минометов. Просим распространить.
Которые не стреляют нихуя, блядь. Обычных студентов, блядь, Янакиева на связи, блядь. Горловка на связи, вся артиллерия на связи, блядь.
Шахтер Старое Снежное.
Всех кинули, блядь. Сказали, умирайте, блядь.
119-я дивизия, 4-й батальон, 1-я, 2-я рота.
That's how a mobilization is proceeding in the Donetsk People's Republic. Males 1860 can't show up on the street because they will be press-ganged immediately. Some hide at home. Others live at their jobs and never leave the building. If you show up outside, you'll be recycled.
Внимание! В Донецкой Народной Республике объявлена мобилизация. Призываем всех граждан мужского пола в возрасте от 18 до 50 прибыть на пункт сбора граждан по адресу. Город Донецк, улица Собинова, дом 4, школа номер 3.
In Donetsk and Luhansk they are literally catching people on streets and press-ganging them into the army. That's very advantageous. Recycling Ukrainian nationals in a war against Ukraine allows to keep Russian official casualty numbers low. Very smart decision. Let me give you an example. A famous pianist from Donetsk was killed in action near Mariupol in April. How did he even get to the army? He was press-ganged and according to the unconfirmed info from the social media, press-ganged by a trick. Philharmonie was cheated. They were told to come to record a nice video, and then go back home. But instead they were all taken in an unknown direction. We were told the same. They cheated us too. Opera, circus, Donbass. He was not a volunteer, like all musicians. On the 28th of February, Pushilin of the Donetsk People's Republics declared they are stopping the mobilization. That didn't happen, of course. Instead they accelerated it, launching a total mobilization. Ukrainian nationals are too convenient cannon fodder for Russia. Some argue that Russians might be doing the same on newly occupied territories. It may be easy to do. Organize a council that will ask to join the DPR or LPR, then launch total mobilization. That is a council in Rozovsky district of Zaporizhzhia Oblast asking to join the DPR.
Обратиться к руководству Донецкой Народной Республики о временном присоединении Розовского района к Донецкой Народной Республике. Прошу голосовать. Счетная комиссия. Работаем. Так, кто против? Кто воздержался? Воздержавшихся нет. Значит, принимается. Принимается. Переходим к третьему.
Russian forces are composed of at least 3 separate structures: Russian regulars, Chechens and the Donbass armies. Whereas Chechens are the hardest of all, it is the forcibly mobilized Ukrainian nationals from Donbass who likely suffer the most casualties. They are expendable. With the war going on, Russian leadership will be incentivized to scale up Donbass' political and socio-economic model of total mobilization and impose it all over Russia, North Korea scenario. And yet, there are some problems which make it harder to execute. Why is forcibly mobilized cannon fodder from Donbass so docile? Well, because they can't really do anything. And why can't they? Because they are too far from Russian centers of political power. Should they rebel, they will be crushed by the far better equipped Russian army. Russian regulars will easily suppress any discontent of those conscripts, while those who give orders to those regulars are simply beyond their reach. And why are they beyond their reach? Because they are far away. There might be lots of discontent among the Donbass mobilized, but this discontent presents no danger because they are concentrated too far away from the Russian centers of political power, and vice versa. If any substantial mass mobilized force is quartered nearby, that's a risk. Moscow is by far the most important transport hub in Russia. Pretty much all of long-distance auto, air and most importantly railway routes from south to north, from west to east, etc. necessarily have to pass through this city. There are few options to bypass it. In case of total mobilization with a military doctrine that doesn't include an option of total mobilization and with an infrastructure for total mobilization dismantled, we'll almost inevitably see a huge concentration of conscripts stuck in Moscow on their way to Ukraine. Total mobilization presents a political rise not so much because of discontent it creates, as because of possible overconcentration of unmotivated armed people with immediate self-interest in overthrowing regime and immediate proximity to the seat of political power. In other words, total mobilization presents a significant risk for the regime because the flows of the mobilized will necessarily have to go through Moscow and many will be stuck there for a long time. That's why launching it all over the country would be dumb. And yet, if mobilization is declared only in regions immediately bordering Ukraine, such as Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod, Voronezh and Rostov, then cannon fodder flows don't have to pass through Moscow, thus reducing revolutionary risks dramatically. End of thread.